Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USAPrepares.com. We're delighted you're in class with us today. We're going to be talking about education. We're going to talk about students. We're going to talk about have things changed with someone who knows. We're going to be talking about what do the students want? What do they demand? What's the faculty and administration's attitude? Are students prepared for the real world? Nathan is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota at GCN. I'm Vincent Finelli. Marty Barrett's with us. Welcome, Marty Barrett.
Hey, glad to be here.
Hey. Thank you for being with us today and sharing your wealth of knowledge about teaching. Now, you've been teaching for about 20 years, the hard sciences, biology, and at the college level, correct?
Right.
Yeah. So you've seen a lot. So, Marty, let me ask you this. Have the students' attitudes changed over the last 2 decades that you have been teaching the hard sciences? Do they?
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
How have they changed? How have they changed?
Well, they're the customer now. It's not just we're all on an even slate, and they feel comfortable complaining about the service they're getting, which certainly we never would have in our era. And they're quite intolerant to foreign accents as well. You know, we have a couple of instructors that have slight accents that they won't tolerate it. Unlike in our day where we had to decode what the guy was saying because we couldn't. My physics teacher was from Greece, and when they say it's all Greek to me, it really was. I had trouble enough understanding, let alone the concept. The slight accent they're extremely intolerant of that.
Okay. Is there anything else that's changed in the last 20 years? Now, being the customer is very interesting, and I can sort of understand that because they're paying for it. But what else are they demanding, if you will, as a customer?
We have one instructor who's kind of elderly, but still on his game, and they don't want to hear him. He teaches with no bells and whistles, but he gets the material across pretty clearly. And they won't tolerate it. They complain about him constantly because they want PowerPoints with all the information. They want everything given to them. They don't want to have to extract the information from what he says.
When you say PowerPoints, they want a copy of the instructor's materials?
Yes.
So the instructor.
Yes.
Okay. So what we're saying is the instructor goes to the front of the room, and this particular instructor, or they expect an instructor to have a PowerPoint presentation, which is available for them to download at any time to reread. So why? So they don't have to take notes?
Yeah, and why should they be there? Is a bigger question. I've had students say, why aren't your lecture notes all online? And I usually say, because I want to see you. I want somebody here to instruct. And they want to be able to do it without the benefit of even having seen you. But most places have some sort of attendance policy to try to guard against that.
Let me see if I've got this right. So are we saying that the students are so lazy that they don't want to come to class?
Sure.
Is that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've been to...
That more and more classes go online, which is ridiculous. We're doing a chemistry lecture and lab online. Would you like to hire a chemist who's only moved the mouse across the stage and, dripped a few drops into this vial on like a computer game to work in your lab?
Well, Marty, you and I sat next to each other at the university in chemistry lab, and that's not how it was. We didn't use a mouse to drop and titrate in vials, tubes, flasks. We didn't do that. We actually did it in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
that's what we did. Okay. I'm kind of disappointed that we've gotten, not you and me, but that education has gotten this far. I mean, has fallen this far. So the students, how seriously are faculty taking the demands of the students?
Well, if you don't take them seriously, in addition to complaints, they're kind of assessing you at the end of the semester. And a lot of your worth at the college, it depends on how you're assessed by the students. So if they're unhappy, you're going to be unhappy because you might be out of a job.
Oh.
So
and I guess they know that, right? Yes. So, all right. So when it comes to rating my instructor, or rating your instructor, whatever that website is.
Yeah.
How seriously is that taken?
I don't believe they look at that, but they have an internal audit. So they tell the students at the end of the semester to go online to a certain site, and they ask you a million questions about the course. Were they on time? Did they get a syllabus? But then also about their teaching methods, and if you thought they were fair. And that counts a lot in your annual evaluation. Okay,
and I can, I've had annual evaluations. It's done by the boss. My dad, as you know, was a teacher, a teaching principal, and an acting superintendent. But my dad was a little different. He actually would sit in on the classes. He didn't rely on anyone else's evaluation of the teachers. Right. He evaluated the teachers. And he didn't say, I'm going to be there on Thursday, for whichever class. He would just show up. So he kept the teachers on their game by, General Electric had a term for that, and they would call that management by walking around. He was visible, and the teachers knew that, and he would review their lesson plans. I mean, he would take them home, and he would sit and review their lessons plans, and there was lots of red ink on them. So if their lesson plans weren't up to his standards, they had to redo them.
Yep. That's the way it used to be. Well, now they still come in and observe your class once a year, but they have to do it at your permission. So you tell them what date to show up. And I know a lot of instructors tell their classes, now ask a lot of questions, behave yourself in class because the boss is coming tomorrow, and kind of set things up, which I think is kind of tacky, but they do that to make sure that, because a lot of it is how the class behaves while they're there.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me give you a little bit of insight to radio, and it's germane to this discussion. So there are several engineers, as you know, who engineer this broadcast. Nathan is engineering today. We've got Andy, Blake, and a few others jump in from time to time. And sometimes a gentleman by the name of John would jump in, and I would never know when that would happen. Now, here's my take on that. So at 9 o'clock in the morning, a.m. Central Time, I connect with high-speed digital to GCN, and I go, I'm here. And this is Vincent, I'm here. And the engineer will say, Ray, good morning, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I'd say, Nathan, it's great to hear your voice. Andy, it's great to hear your voice. Blake, it's great to hear your voice. And every once in a while, I wouldn't really be able to catch very quickly this other person's voice. And sometimes it was a guy named John. Now, John, at that time, he's no longer with GCN, but at the time he was the program director. He's the guy who decided who's on the air and who's not. Uh-huh. Who's worthy of being on the air, which programs are, cogent, salient, on the mark, worth spending the time, the effort, the money to keep on the air. That's what he did. And, he would just show up. Now, for me, wow, what an honor. But it also meant I had to be prepared. Okay, I just couldn't tread water. I just couldn't say, well, shoot, I have no idea where our instructor is. Well, geez, I couldn't do that. I had to be prepared all the time because I never knew when, the principal was going to be in class watching me teach, evaluating my methods. Mm-hmm. So it even happens in radio, and I think it's a good thing. Well, let me ask you, what do these young people who are in class, and I guess most of them are young, and I guess some are a little older, but what do they expect to determine their grades? How do they expect their teacher to determine their grades, or do they want to determine their own grades?
Well, I'm sure they would take that option if it were available. But my students have varied from age 13 to 77. So try to keep that whole area enthused with what you're talking about. And, some with very high intelligence and some just out of high school and don't really want to be there. So what they want is that they want attendance grades. They want credit for being there. So for breathing in your chair ought to get you a couple of points. And in college, it shouldn't. I guess they've been kind of pampered on the way there and feel that that's acceptable. And I think you have to do more than just breathe in your seat to get a grade.
Yeah, we're going to be going into a break in a few minutes, and I'd like to share a quick story with you about something that's happened to me, and I didn't do something that I normally do, but I need a little bit more time than a minute to tell that story, and I'd love to hear your response. So the students feel that they should get credit for showing up. They also, some students feel that they don't need to show up.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yep,
okay.
Some feel that they should just be able to look at the stuff at home, and if they can do it on their own, fine.
Okay. Do you think that they really look at the material at home? Can you get a feel for that? For example, if you weren't there, do you think, based on your experience of what they have shown you, in terms of dedication and homework, those kinds of things that you can actually measure, do you think that they would really do a good job if they were left on their own to their own devices, their own somewhat own timetable?
There are those that would and those that wouldn't.
Okay. Would you want, and you teach biology and future nurses, would you want a future nurse who was left to his or her own devices?
No.
Thanks for protecting us. Marty Barrett. We'll be right. Marty Barrett's with us, and we're talking about students, and we're talking about what is happening in education. And here's a story that I believe relates, and I think the times are changing, and this might be an illustration of that. So, Marty, just to preface this, when I get my hair cut, I overtip. I tip at least 50%, at least. Okay?
Wow.
When I go to a restaurant, I overtip. Okay? And generally, the service is excellent. So we had a tire blowout on the back of one of our tractors, and it's about a 10,000-pound tractor. The tire measures 5 3/4 feet tall, almost 6 feet tall.
Wow.
Tire weighs 346 pounds. That's what the tire weighs, without the rim, okay? So we contacted our local tire guy, a guy I've been doing business with for years and years and years, and he said, well, all right, what size? I told him size. He said, all right, good. Let me come on out. And now it's about maybe 4 miles from his shop where he lives and works on his farm to our farm. And I said, well, we've got the air tools, we've got the compressor, we've got the the tire spoons, which are the tools used to remove tires from rims. And I said, we've got hydraulic jack, the tractor's already jacked up for you, and we've got the impact gun and sockets, necessary. If you need anything else, please bring it. Okay, so he came out, took a look, said, okay. Next day, he brought the tires. Now, we had negotiated the price. When I say negotiated, actually, he gave me different prices, and they kept changing. And he said, we'll charge you $35 a piece to change the tires. Well, then he changed it to $50. I said, okay. So when he showed up to look, he brought 2 other helpers with him. One was a young volunteer boy, a farm boy, and the other guy was his father. So the 3 guys came and took a look. I gave each one of them a USA Prepares coffee mug, and I gave the owner of the tire shop a canister of Beyond Tangy Tangerine, which is a supplement that costs about $60. I said, here you go. Now, they worked on the tires, and they didn't do it the way we wanted. And our son was there, and I was there. And we said, look, they're not going to be on. They're going to wobble. If you put the tires on, the tires are going to wobble. They're going to go down the street or down the road as if the wheels are bent. So I said, here's what you need to do. But they didn't want to do it that way. They wanted to do it their way. And sure enough, when they were all done, the tires were not true, and it would look like bent rims, at least out 1 inch wobble, which is, you couldn't drive without, jumping out of your seat as this tractor went down the road or down the field. It was just unacceptable. So I did something that I have never done, and that is I did not tip them, in addition to what I already gave them. I didn't. And what happened was our son and I had to jack up the tractor again, and we spent a couple hours truing the tires. Now, it was easier to true them the way when they had it up in the air the first time, but no, they didn't want to do that. So the question is, do you reward somebody for working hard? It took them 4 hours. It shouldn't have taken 4 hours, but it did because they didn't really want to pay attention. They didn't want to mark the rims on the wheels before they took it apart the way we would have. They weren't as careful as we would have been, and if they were, it would have been a lot easier, but it took them twice as long. It took them 4 hours instead of 2 hours, and the job was not done satisfactorily because we had to redo it. Now, the question is, in a situation like that, yes, they worked hard. It was hot. It was sweaty. They worked hard, but they didn't do a good job, not to my standards, or as good of a job as we ended up doing for ourselves. Do you tip someone like that? Or do you just say thanks very much and, did they earn a tip? And how does this relate to education? Well, because the students work hard or they show up, but they don't do well in regurgitating the information or understanding the information or displaying a knowledge of the information. Do you give them a tip or a good grade because they were there? Or do you grade them based on how well they've done learning and understanding and being able to discuss what they've learned? So that tipping situation, how do you feel about that?
I agree with you totally. I don't think a tip is indicating a job well done, and you don't get it for just showing up. And I don't think the students do as well. I think they need to prove it to me, not by just being there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So by proving it to you, when they leave the classroom and go on to further education, they will be able to do a better job in the next class because education builds, right, on the previous experiences, right?
Yep, I lay the
foundation. Let's talk about, are they prepared? Marty Barrett's with us, college instructor for 20 years, and she teaches biology. I've known Marty for since the early 1970s. Marty, students today, are they prepared for classes like yours, the hard sciences? And what I mean by that, have students been passed along from previous classes that they would use to build upon in order to understand your class? Are they prepared for your class?
Some are, and there's some that are way far behind. I had a student this semester, which I would say she's on a third grade level. And how do you take somebody who's 50 years old and catch them up to where they should be now? It didn't have the background to even learn the basic concepts. It really, really kind of sad.
How does that happen? Can anybody take any classes? I mean, can I just say, well, I want to be a rocket scientist. Let me start at the 400 level.
Well, depending on, you have to pass tests in reading comprehension, writing, and math.
Okay.
If you're not up to snuff, they'll put you in remedial classes for those three.
Okay.
But other than that, you can take anything you like.
All right. So did this lady pass those classes or those tests?
She got a C on trial number 4.
Okay, so she took
the
tests
class.
4 times. She's certainly persistent.
That's what made me sad about the whole thing. Is if she had a decent education before and parents that really cared, she wouldn't be in this mess. I don't think she was incapable of learning. It was just so far behind. Nobody really taken the effort with her before. Okay.
So did this person have a job and just wanted to get ahead? Was that the plan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Which it's probably not going to come true for her. Okay. But I admire her resilience.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe there's other classes she can take and maybe do better or go through some of that remediation. Heck, I was dyslexic and I could hardly read. And when I was in elementary school, my teachers thought that I need to be in the short bus class, the one where. Yeah. But my mom said no. He's just having trouble reading. The letters are jumping around the page, and so I worked and finally outgrew being dyslexic. And but it took effort. So maybe that's what she needs to do. Maybe she needs to keep applying herself and just start to catch up, and when she at the point where she is caught up, then take the class. So that leads me to the next question, Marty. Now, my parents, when I was in elementary school and I would have homework, I would sit and do my homework, and my dad would come in and say, "Well, so how you doing? Let's take a look." And he would kind of monitor that. My mom was interested in my work as well. And, over the years, if I wrote papers, they would read them. "Oh, let's take a look. Let's see how you're doing. Let's see what you're up to. Let's see what your thoughts are. And let's see if we can, offer any advice and counsel and suggestions and opinions and so forth." And what would happen is they would give me constructive criticism. Now, they didn't do my homework for me. I did it, but they were interested and they reviewed it. Is that what happened with your parents?
Yeah, to some extent. Certainly with my children, I did that. And I remember with my dad one time trying to have him understand my geometry homework. And I said, "Okay, you got this rhombus." And my dad goes, "What's a rhombus?" And then as I explained it to him, I figured out the problem and left. And came back a few minutes later, my dad was still there trying to work on the problem.
Well,
and I get neighborhood kids ask me things like that too, and I get obsessed. I got to solve this.
Well, that's really wonderful.
With my kids.
Okay, and with our children, we've done the same thing. So if they had math, well, we homeschooled them too, but and we would look at, they'd have to write papers and do math and those kinds of things. And Mrs. Finelli worked with them to a great extent. I worked with them as well, and we would review their homework. Then, as they went to further studies, where they went on to, our children went to college, and they had papers and projects and things, and we would look at them and review them and give them our opinions before they were turned in, so they could, learn from us and learn more from their teachers. And it really worked well. So are you seeing that parents are doing the same thing today?
Not at my level, no. But one girl, I remember her saying that her father studied with her every night, went over her flashcards with her, and she was young. She was 18, and I thought that was great. And he kept saying that he learned a few things along the way.
Of course. So, all right, based on that experience, do you think that student was better off than that student would have been without spending time with her father?
Oh, yeah. That was a big help.
All right. So why is it then that, I guess, most parents are not like that? Is that correct? Yeah.
And I tell my students sometimes it helps students to read out loud, even if they're an auditory learner. And
even if they're alone?
To their dog if they want to. They can study with their dog. Just the act of doing that. I guess the whole secret is learning what kind of learner you are and doing it. And it can be pretty challenging. One of my daughters also had reading problems when she was in first grade. And they discovered she was a tactile learner, by touch. So one of my friends, who's a special ed teacher, took shaving cream and put it all over a cookie sheet in the kitchen. And said, "Okay, now form your letters in the shaving cream." And boy, she was great at that. It kind of opened up a whole new world for her, and I started working with her on that level, and she did exceptionally well eventually. We just had to kind of unlock that secret.
Okay, so she's a tactile learner. All right, let me ask you, what is she doing now?
She's building airplane engines. Which is a tactile kind of thing.
So that teacher was right from early years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And she loves to read, and she had horrible reading problems as a child. But part of it was tracking, trouble tracking across the line. Can you imagine if you start to read one line and then you finish it on the next line? It doesn't make any sense.
That's what I used to do. That's why they thought I was retarded. Seriously. All right.
Yeah, that's what they do.
Yeah.
And,
well,
people just think that's them. There's no way to cure it.
Well, there are ways to cure it. There are ways to cure it, and what I did was I took colored paper, like pink or blue, just light pink or light blue, cut it into a strip maybe 1 inch wide and the width of the page, and I would use that as an underline that would go lower and lower and lower as I read each line, and that helped me. You can do the same thing with a large index card, turned over so the lines are on the side that's not seen.
Well, now they have a thing where they have a little plastic window just for that line. I guess they expanded upon your project. So a little window that just shows you one line at a time.
They used to make a device called a tachistoscope, and it would show it was a projector, and it would show one line at a time, and it would travel.
Oh, I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, and that's for people who had trouble, with dyslexia and reading. Okay. So we think that if parents were involved more, that the students would do better and understand more, and probably learn at a faster rate and an ever-increasing rate, and it'd be better for everybody, right? And you mentioned reading to the dog. Oh, some people may think that that's kind of funny and silly and odd. Well, I don't, and I'll tell you why. I go out every day and I'll sit in on the veranda, and the dogs will come over and I'll talk to them. They really appreciate me talking to them. Now, whether I'm reading to them or talking to them, I don't think it makes all that much difference to them. They just want the attention. And I think it's good for the dogs, and I think it's good for me. And I just as an aside, I tell my dogs I love them every day. Every pet we have, even the chickens, I tell them I love them, and thank you for being part of our family, and thank you for adopting us.
Yeah. Well, you know what happens as you pet your dog, you're releasing oxytocin from your brain, which is they call it like the cuddle hormone. Makes you feel warm and fuzzy. They've done experiments to show that the dog gets the same benefit. So there's actually a physiological thing that both of you are feeling better through that process. So it makes sense to me.
Absolutely.
And our dogs run the place here. They just let us live here. They love to death. 3 rescues that don't even know. They forgot long ago they're rescues. They want service right away. Why don't I open the door faster?
Yeah.
But they're wonderful.
Absolutely.
I couldn't live without them.
And their family. Marty, do students cheat today?
Oh, my goodness. Yes, they do.
Okay.
And it mainly involves, like 10 to 20 years ago, it was always mastering the art of tiny writing. They'd have some kind of piece of paper tucked in somewhere with, writing the size of a head of a pin, little tiny writing all their notes. And that's what I used to find. Now I just find a phone between their legs or a smartwatch. They don't take the time to master the tiny writing anymore. They don't need to. They use their devices.
So they're checking their watches, looking at their phones. What would so they've got their notes, their cheat sheet on their phone. Or can you prevent them from taking their phones into class?
No. And some instructors collect all the phones. But the problem with that is, if I have a 70-person class, and I collect all the phones in a big pile, I'm afraid people are going to take the wrong phones, and it's going to be a huge mess.
Yeah, and it would take 5 minutes or 10 minutes to do that.
Yeah, I tell them I don't want to see a phone. If I see a phone, I assume you're cheating. And I want to see hands on the table, no fuddling around, anywhere else. And often somebody tells me. They hand their test in, they write at the bottom, guy next to me has his phone in his lap. And I can't charge them just by hearsay, but I can keep a close eye on that guy and then call him down. So I try to be as vigilant as possible. And I've caught many over the years, and I've mastered the art of ripping up a test so loud that the room next door hears it. So they get the idea I don't like cheating.
Well, heck, no one wants a mechanic that doesn't know what he's doing. No one wants a doctor or a nurse who doesn't know what he or she is doing. And we've got one more segment, but thank you for protecting us, Marty. Jeez. So, Marty Barrett, as you teach college level biology classes, and you watch students trying to cheat, what kind of material are they cheating? Are they using formulas, or are they just trying to have multiple choice answers because they really don't know what is it that they're cheating with? What is the material that they're using? We know that.
Well, I had one student that told me that my test was the first test they'd taken in college, that wasn't multiple choice. And they wanted to know where the word bank was. They want a selection of choices to pick for the question. With open-ended questions, they expect to be given a list of acceptable words that some of them would fit. And I was shocked by that, and it made me want to continue to teach open-ended questions. You have to come up with the material yourself. I'm not going to supply all the choices and you luck out and pick the right one.
Marty, when I taught advanced computer science at the high school level, I did not use PowerPoint. I spoke, and I would draw on the board. And
I did the same thing.
And those notes are available until I erase them and move on to the next thing that I'm going to write on the board. Okay? And what that did was that forced the students to look up, pay attention, multitask, listen, write, comprehend, all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And, I would tell them what I was going to tell them. I would tell them, and then I would tell them what I told them. But I didn't hand them cheat sheets that were pre-printed for the pleasure of passing exams. And
right.
a lot of the weight of the examination was hands-on, and I'd watch them demonstrate what they learned. They had to do it. And if they couldn't do it, they didn't pass. And I guess maybe the class was so demanding that I had a 75% dropout rate early in the. Oh yeah. I was able to shed 3/4 of my class, within 30 days, 45 days. It was great.
Wow. It is great.
I had
you didn't have a job in most places.
Well, I had 60 students, and they whittled themselves down to 15. And those 15 were pretty darn good. The rest of them probably couldn't have cut it. So what's wrong? What are we doing wrong? I mean, not you, not me, but what are teachers doing wrong, or what's the system doing wrong that's allowing these students to not be able to understand the material as well as we did when we were in their shoes?
Yeah, I don't know how to back up. I think it's because this generation has been coddled a little bit by their parents and by their teachers, and they need to know that just this is the way it's done, and that's it. There's no wiggle room. This is the stuff you have to know, and you have to know it. And they
all right.
they find that not right.
When you communicate with your students, okay, you communicate with them, and they respond. Do they respond in cryptic ways, like they use shortcuts of cell phone text communications with you and expect that that's acceptable?
Yeah, a lot do online. They say, like, I get lots of, hey, what's my grade? That's the only thing it says. It doesn't say what class you're in. I have to derive your name from the address, which is often from their home address, and it's some kind of goofy thing that I don't know, So,
hey, hey, wait a minute. Hey, what's my grade?
What's my grade? Plenty of them.
Wow. What's wrong with Mrs. Barrett or Dr. Barrett? I am Vincent Finelli. I was just checking in to see what my grade status is. Can you provide that? Thank you very much. Vincent Finelli. What's wrong with that?
I get some of those,
Does that happen?
too. Yeah, I get some of those. I do, which is refreshing.
Okay. Wow. To me, that's just common. That should be that should be the beginning. That should be like the lowest common denominator. Wow. We're in trouble. Marty, thank you so much for being with us. I look forward to being on the air with you again and again and again. Marty Barrett.
Okay.
Biology instructor at the college level. Thank you, Marty. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked. Hour number 2 of the USA Prepares. Craig Douglas is with us. And Craig is a USA Prepares instructor. He travels the country going from show to show to show and teaches preparedness. He teaches people about radiation. He teaches people about food storage systems, how to do it economically, viably, effectively, inexpensively. And He's with us today, and he's also going to teach us about the cops stealing his home. Welcome, Craig Douglas.
Hello, Vincent.
You know, Craig, it's always good to hear your voice. And I'm sorry it didn't work out this trip when you came by through Springfield, Missouri. Would have loved to have seen it. Didn't work out, but next time I'm pretty darn sure we can make it happen. So, Craig, you were going to teach us a couple things today. One, of course, is what's happening in the prepper show environment. What's the audience like, the guests like, the seminars? What are people saying? What are they looking for? What do they want? What do they need to know? What don't they know? And also, there's an interesting thing that's happened to you because of the way you travel, and you bring your home with you wherever you go, right?
Yeah, because I do live in my van that I go to show with.
Mm-hmm. So, class, would it be okay if I explain what this is like, Craig, or do you not want me to do that?
Explain what it is to live in a van. Do you know?
Well, it's sort of. I mean, not for as long as you do, but what I'm saying. How about this, class? Craig has a typical van, okay, and he has a bed area in that van, and he travels with that, and his inventory is with him in the van. So he's got his business in the van. He's got a rack, if you will, that he can climb up into and sleep. And he travels from show to show to show. And for shower and bathing and all that, he stops at locations where he pays for that opportunity. Is that right?
Yeah, for showers, generally it's truck stops. But I don't have a rack. It's whatever sturdy that I basically sleep on top of the boxes because I bring so much with me. And it's whatever sturdy I have, and usually it's cans of Mountain House food that I end up sleeping on. I lay out flat, and I sleep right on my stock, and then go to the next show.
Okay. All right. So, Craig, you've been arrested. You've been arrested while you're traveling. They interrupted your business. They interrupted your travel. They took your home. Tell us about that, please.
Yeah, that happens about every couple of years because I don't think you mentioned yet, I don't have a driver's license. As many will maybe know, listening to your audience, this will get into sovereignty issues a little bit. I don't have a Social Security number, and so anywhere you go in the country, you basically cannot get a driver's license without a Social Security number. So I'm prevented from getting a driver's license in essence. So I exercise my free right to travel. Basically, I have full freedom to go on my roadways from place to place at my leisure, and the government can't really pass laws where there is no, in this case it's not laws, it's actually statutes, where you have no victim, no injured party, damaging somebody else's life, liberty, or property. Corpus delicti, they call it. Since there is no way for them to pass a, quote, law, they pass these statutes which go against the law, suggesting that we can't go from place to place without certain papers in our possession. And one of those pieces of paper is a driver's license. Now, in the case of what happened to me, it happens every once in a while to me. I have to deal with this all the time. It's part of the life that I live. And because I don't have the piece of paper called the driver's license, that usually gets me, doesn't always get me in jail. Sometimes they just let me go. It depends on where and what the circumstances are. Sometimes they just give me a ticket, or some other times they take me to jail. And when they do that, they seize the van. And what's been happening here recently, because I have not been voluntarily giving my van away to the state. Let me explain that. When anybody purchases a van or car or something of that nature in this country, you essentially, feeling that you're the proud owner of this new whatever you have, you run down to the BMV of your state, and you apply for something called a title. But in actuality, what they give you back is in a piece of paper that says on the top, and you all can look at this, it says certificate of title on the top. It's not true ownership. Essentially what you've done there is you run to the state and you said, well, gee, I would like you to help me manage this, and so here, I'm giving you this van or car or whatever and you need to turn it into a vehicle, and the word vehicle has a meaning in law, what that means, and then it employs now you're in a state vehicle, and you now must go by all the rules of their role, all the statutes they make dealing with car ownership, such as registration, insurance, licensing, whatever, maybe even emissions testing. because now you're in a company's car, essentially. You're in a state vehicle, and so they make the rules. It's their car. And I refused to do that this last van that I bought because essentially they've made it impossible for me. Now, I'm actually in the process of trying to get a lawsuit right now, a federal lawsuit, because what happened is when I got arrested actually a couple of weeks ago in Ohio, I was doing a show in Ohio, and they stole my van, and essentially they refused to give it back because when you go into the BMV of your state, whatever state you're listening, unless you're not in the United States, basically they'll ask for 3 or 4 things from you in order to get your van back. Proof of ownership, proof of registration. If you want to drive it away, you'll have to have registration, insurance, and a driver's license. But that first one, proof of ownership, essentially these states don't recognize the ownership of that van they stole from me unless I voluntarily went to the state and gave it to the state to get that piece of paper that says certificate of title on the top, which isn't a title. It's actually a clouded title that the state actually owns. But because when I purchase cars now, what I end up doing is I end up getting just a bill of sale, and they sign over their certificate of title, because that's usually how it works in this country. They sign over the official document they have, and then and they give you a bill of sale. In this case, I had a release of lien, too, for this particular van, because apparently the person had a lien on it at one time. But he gave me a release of lien and a bill of sale, and then I had the certificate of title signed over to me. And then I did nothing else beyond that, you see. I didn't run to the state and give my vehicle to the state, or my car to the state. And so, in that instance now, the state thinks that previous owner still owns it, but yet I have a bill of sale showing I own it, that I purchased it from this person, and I don't intend to, and I can't. I hope I'm not going too fast here. In this case, with Ohio it is, and it's going to be the same thing in virtually in every state. Ohio is recognizing the previous owner, even though I have a proof of ownership. And then so if I go down to try to get my van back, my place that I live, they refuse to give it back because I can't prove that I'm that person on the previous title that I have in my possession. So they're thinking that the previous owner owns it. So why don't I go get a certificate title for my van? I can't. Essentially, this is a homeless issue here. When you're homeless, if anybody's been homeless, you know this to be true, you don't have an address. And when you don't have an address and you go to the BMV and you say, I want to get this car in my name, and you've got to fill out your address in there. And if you don't have an address, you can't fill the form out. Now, a lot of people will run and actually use a fake address, or they're somebody they know, some other address where they can receive mail. But if you don't have an address, you can't get a certificate of title, unless you lie on the form by putting a fake address or someone else's address. I think they probably want to know where they can come pick you up if they have to pick you up. So they need an address. And I don't have one. And when I tell them that, I said, well, I can't put in an address here because if I did, I would be committing perjury, which your form clearly shows, signing under the penalty of perjury, that all information is true and correct. And if I put a fake address on there, then I would be committing perjury, so I will not do that. So I apparently can't get your state, in this case Ohio, to give me a title, for a certificate of title. And so they're in a quandary there. They can't give me a piece of paper without an address because they won't allow it. The regulations won't allow it. And yet I can't prove my ownership of this thing. So now my van gets stolen, and I can't, according to them, I can't prove that I own it, so I can't get my van back. And I say, well, okay, the Fifth Amendment kind of requires you, if you're going to steal my van, that's a taking, and something in the Constitution kind of tells you in the Fifth Amendment that you're going to have to reimburse me for that stolen van, that property that you've taken from me, which I'm trying to think of a word in the Constitution. Maybe you can think of it, Vincent. Not eminent domain. It's the same kind of thing as eminent domain, but just compensation. That's the words used in the Constitution. Without just compensation, they can't take your property. But they did, and they're refusing to give it back. They're only going to give it back to the previous owner, essentially, which they think is the current owner. And yet I'm standing there with a bill of sale, a release of lien, and the proof that I own the car. So my need is, because I've had the same van stolen now twice in this method in the last year and a half or so, I need to file a federal lawsuit. I've tried contacting the ACLU and other homeless advocacy groups, and I can't seem to get any of them, so I'm going to have to do it myself somehow. I'm not that good at this. I know some basics, but I'm bound to make mistakes. So I am kind of looking for a sharp paralegal if anybody's out there could contact me through either Vincent or a website of mine or whatever. But I have to get this done because I can't have them stealing my house. This last time they stole my house, I had to sleep outside, and I got a tick bite, and I'm sure hoping I don't come down with Lyme disease or something. It's a lot easier to live in a van than it is to live on the streets, because I've had to do that before when they stole my van. The previous time, I had to live on the streets for 4 days before I could get my van back. And the only way I was able to get my van back is by trickery, essentially. I essentially walked with the bill of sale that I had and the certificate of title for the previous owner and the release of lien, and I had a friend of mine, I sold it to him. And he, using his licensing and all the other things he already has, he's in the system, he went and registered, insured it, blah, 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 did all the things that they require you to do to get your van back. And then basically I bought it back from him again when he got it out of the impound. So they're stealing people's property and they're refusing to give them just compensation for it. That's essentially what the lawsuit should be about. I've already notified the Ohio DMV about this, the Hamilton County Sheriff, which is Cincinnati. Also the Hamilton County prosecuting attorney, the cops that arrested me. All these people have been, and this last time, Bowling Green, Ohio also, they're all going to be included in the lawsuit because it's about property rights, essentially.
Hold that thought. We're going to break. Craig Douglas. Class, if you'd like to help Craig Douglas with this pursuit, if you are in the legal arena at some level, and if you'd like to help Craig Douglas, you can contact him at his email address, forbiddenknowledge@yahoo.com. forbiddenknowledge@yahoo.com. Or you can contact me at instructor@usaprepares.com. instructor@usaprepares.com, and I will get that information to Craig Douglas. Craig, what is the arrest procedure? When you've been arrested, is there one cop? Are there multiple cops? Do they put you in handcuffs? Are they gentle? Do they slam you on the hood? Do they throw you in the back of the car, or do they ease you into the back of the car? Is it a paddy wagon? What is it? How does it go?
Typically, let's see, the one that happened just a couple weeks ago. Generally, this time I was ambushed. Actually, it was pretty interesting. I was actually doing a show at a fairgrounds, and you had to park across the street. And I was just going from the parking lot from across the street to the main arena to pack the things in the van. I was on the road for about 100 feet. And there was no cops around visibly, so he was hiding somewhere. Anyway, I pulled into the fairgrounds, and then all of a sudden he's right behind me from somewhere. And so he was waiting for me. And it's always one cop to begin with, but very quickly there's usually at least 2 others that come. Once they find out I have no driver's license, no proof of insurance, no registration, all that good stuff, they call for backup. And so very quickly there's 3 to 4 cars behind me with their lights flashing. Even at the fairgrounds, they did that. Even though I was not on the public road, I was inside the fairgrounds when they pulled me over, so to speak. And then generally, they talk to you. They ask for your papers, please. You can't go on the road unless you have papers, right? So they ask for your 3 pieces of paper. Usually that means a driver's license, proof of insurance, and registration. And if you don't have those pieces of paper, that's when they call for backup. And they treat you like some kind of common criminal, even though I'm not disobeying any laws. I'm exercising my free right to travel. And they typically then will put you in the police car with handcuffs in your back, and the nice, comfortable seats they have in those things. They're just hard plastic seats these days. And then they'll take you to jail, and they'll take all your stuff from you. You have no idea what happens to your van after that. Generally, you don't get to see it leave. You're off to jail. And they take all your stuff, make you change into some fancy clothing they supply you with. They give you some nice meals that wouldn't be suitable for many dogs. And they take all your stuff. And one time I refused to give it back because I don't tend to give them jurisdiction. I always challenge. I do not consent. I don't sign anything. I don't take their scanning, the radiation scannings, and all the other things that they do. I tend not to do that stuff. They put me away from the other people in this jail generally because I'm a special case, And what was always interesting to me is they never give you back your property, essentially. Even though they swear up and down they'll give you your property back. One time they didn't give me back anything because I refused to sign the release form to get my property back. Well, I'll tell them, well, hey, I didn't sign anything when you stole it from me, and they refused to give it back to me. So that's going to be included in the lawsuit as well. I walked out of there with nothing, not even a belt or sunglasses, all the things that I had with me on my person when I went in there. And they also don't give you your money back. They literally don't give you your money back. This time, they stole all my money, and they even went looking in the van to find all the stuff and then bring it with you. I would have preferred it left in the van. I might have got it back. They stole all my money. Essentially, their version of it is, well, we can't keep cash here, so we take your cash, and then we give you a card, piece of plastic, that you're supposed to use for your money. It's essentially, I guess it's a debit card. But me, without Social Security number, doing no banking or anything, and plus not even be able to call a taxi or anything. I'm literally out on the streets when they pushed me out the door. They literally stole my money, too. So they don't give you back your property. I mean, that money was my property. Instead, they gave me back something else, a piece of plastic that I can't use. And so they don't give you your property back, and sometimes other things are missing, too. There were some things missing in the van when I finally got to it, about 4 or 5 days later, because I had trouble getting somebody to help me get it, because I had to have the van purchased again from me, and then I would have to purchase it back. There's got to be the main justification. The main thing here with this lawsuit is to try to get some kind of property right, to see if there's any way that someone can actually own their own van.
Talking about own your own van, meaning you, like if you went to a store and bought a child's red wagon, you own that. You own it. And you're saying that you don't own it because you haven't put it through their system to give you a clouded title. We'll be right back. Craig Douglas was with us. So, Craig Douglas, just as an aside, do you ever hear snide comments when you are being arrested, either by the first cop that shows up or the 3, 4, 5, 6 extra cars that show up after that? Do they have any snide comments that you've overheard about you?
Oh, sure. Well, they sometimes just say it to your face. They don't care. And when I tell them I can't get a driver's license, it's not possible for me, and I tell them because I don't have a Social Security number. Most usually they say, well, you could get a Social Security number if you wanted one. That's usually their response. So they don't want to hear it. They don't care. They don't want to hear it until it gets up on the stand, and then they have to answer certain questions. It quickly becomes uncomfortable for them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Have you ever gotten an apology where they said, you know what? This was an illegal arrest. We should never have, put you through this. We should have never put you in those tight handcuffs, put you in the back of a patrol car, giving you bologna sandwiches for, the big meal of the day.
Never.
Have they ever said
never.
that?
Nope, never. But sometimes the cops that let me go, even when I don't have the 3 pieces of paper, and they realize that, and I don't know the reasons behind it sometimes. Sometimes maybe they're just about ready to end their shift. They don't want to have to stay over dealing with this, whatever. There's whatever reason they have. Sometimes they'll actually shake my hand and say, well, have a nice day. So it really depends on the cop. Every cop is different. They're real people. Underneath that uniform, they are real people. And sometimes they just don't act like it. So some of them probably are secretly appreciative of what I do. Others just want to play the big Barney Fife cop and want to take you in and throw the book at you.
Have you found that some states are not as pleasant to travel through than others?
Well, I believe, and I've heard this, and I haven't investigated it, but there are certain states that they aren't enforcing the no driver's license issue. I don't have the list of those states. I can tell you that I have been released 3 times in Indiana, and I have been released twice in Maryland. I'm not saying those states are the states, some of the states, but certain states I've also been released in Kansas without having any paperwork on me whatsoever. And again, it could just be the cop, because the cop has his personal decision. He can just let you go if he wants. But other states I have heard have this policy where they realize they can lose the cases very easily. They could cost them a lot of money, and it's only a Class C misdemeanor or whatever. It's not worth pursuing sometimes to them, because if you cost them more money than they think they're going to get out of you, they tend to leave you alone. And some of the states have probably realized that. And again, I don't know for sure which states those are, but there are many times I've been released, more than once in particular states.
Craig, I know you, and you've been here at the farm. We've traveled together. We've done events, in the same buildings. We spent time together. We've been together after the official seminars that you've done and I've done. We've had dinner together, that kind of thing, for years, over the years. You are not funny looking. You're not weird. You're not unkempt. You don't smell. I mean, all the things that someone might attribute to someone who might be homeless. You're none of those things.
Right.
To me, you're a clean cut guy. You're tall. You're handsome. You've got a great body mass index. Okay. I mean, you're not overweight. You're not sloppy. You don't drool. You're a nice guy. It makes no sense to me that they would pull you over and give you this harassment. It makes no sense. And when you're in that jail cell, if you were ever in with a bunch of other guys, you would be the guy that would stand out as like, why is that guy there? Is that right or is that not right?
Yeah, that's right. I probably never told you, though, I do have ODD.
ODD.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's odd.
Well, I wouldn't say you're odd, ODD. I would say that you just don't take direction very well, which is the common thread through all of our instructors. You think for yourself. You're brighter than the average bear by far, and that's kind of who USA Prepares instructors are.
I'm trying to.
I wouldn't say.
I'm trying to not be a slave anymore for the rest of my life. I'm trying to be.
Yeah. And you would think that they'd come after me a lot more because I teach people how to avoid paying taxes legally. So I keep their hands out of our pockets. That's pretty frustrating.
That's a whole other story. Yeah, that's a whole other story with the IRS.
Yeah. All right. So Craig Douglas, conventions. Now you've been to the Get Prepared Expo, many of them, and you've been to other preparedness expos. What's happening in the preparedness world, let's say over the last 10 years? What's happened?
10 years. Well, that's about the time I've been doing it, so I couldn't say to you how it's any different now than it was, 20 years ago.
I'm talking about 10 years.
Yeah. The 10 years I've been doing it, recently, and I think, and for me, my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinions when I talk to other vendors around the country, in the last year and a half, the shows have been pretty lousy for us vendors. Most of us believe, and I certainly believe, it's what I'm calling the Trump effect. Ever since Donald Trump has got elected, all the shows, both prepper shows and gun shows alike, seem to have waned to where we are having a really hard time to survive as a vendor in the prepper industry. So the attendance seems to be down, less money is being spent. I guess people don't seem to be concerned. Obviously, if Hillary, that's what I call Hillary, if she had gotten into office, then probably the movement would have even picked up more, probably, because more people would have been nervous about it. But for whatever reason, whether it's justified or not, people seem to be not so worried with Donald Trump in office. And I don't quite see why, because frankly, sometimes he's doing some kind of crazy things, maybe sometimes good things, but I'm not Republican or Democrat, so I usually do talk against the president, no matter who he or she is anyway. It's just that people seem to have the false notion that things are okay now that Donald Trump's in office. Okay, so you were at a convention, the largest of the current conventions in the preparedness world, the largest owner of those events in the country right now. I would have to say that would be PrepperCon in Salt Lake City. That's probably the biggest. The one that has the most shows is this RK Prepper Shows, and that's maybe the one you're referring to. Yeah, I'm referring to RK. They have the greatest number of shows. And so you gave a seminar recently. What did you talk about? With RK Prepper Shows, they have me speak on food storage, how to select what's best for you, and I also talked briefly about water treatment, getting safe water, because those are obviously two very important things. And for these shows, they're a little bit smaller. Those are like a bare minimum that you need to get out of a seminar when you go to a prepper show. Those are like two great starting points for beginners. And so that's what I speak on, food and water, basically. Okay. And how many, so you did how many seminars in the last weekend? How many seminars did you present? 20 days, two. Okay, so you did two. How many people did you have in your seminar room paying attention to you? On Saturday, it was about 30 people, which is a pretty decent turnout, depending on the size of the show, because you got to remember, there are other classes. Most of these prepper shows have other classes at the same time. So people coming in the door can choose which class they want to go to. So when you get a pretty good turnout when there's multiple classes, it feels pretty good. So I had about 30 people on Saturday, but Sunday there was only 2 people that showed up in mine. And some people on Sunday had absolutely 0 people show up in their class. So, and that has happened to me before in the past year, in the recent past. But that never really used to happen before Trump.
Yeah. So typically when I would give a seminar, and people would stay after. Okay, so the seminar would be over at, let's say, top of the hour. And there were people who would be hanging around with lots of questions. And we'd form like a circle, and I'd address all the questions. I would talk to the group, we'll call them, that stayed after, the seminar was over. And they had greater interest. And then people would follow me back to the table or the booth, and we'd talk further. Do they do that today, or has that changed?
Yes, I see some of that. Unfortunately, with me, I have to limit that because I work at my tables alone, and I basically have to cover up my tables and leave and hope nothing gets stolen. So I need to get back, and I tell people that. I basically tell them, while I'm packing up my computer and things, yes, I get people coming up and getting a few basic questions in. But after that, I say, hey, I got to go back to my table. Please come to my table, and I'll answer all your questions. So, yes, there are some people that stick around. And, of course, if you have 30 people in the group, typically you're going to get 3 or 4 people that want to stick around and ask a quick question, something that maybe they were embarrassed to ask during the class, or also maybe I didn't have enough time, and had to cut the class short. So, yes, I still did get that, not probably as much as before, only because the class sizes have generally been lower.
Yeah, but about 10%. Okay, so that probably holds true. All right, so the next question is, what are they asking you? What is the level of preparedness that you are learning where they are? Are they prepared? Do they have no clue? Are they somewhere in the middle? Are you concerned about them? What is their level of preparedness?
Well, that's a strange question. It's not unusual. It's not a bad question. It's just the answer. I don't know how to answer that exactly. What happens is people get a lot of their preparedness, their fears, let's say, from the Internet. And the Internet has so many unsubstantiated and just all-out false reasons to be fearful that it creates a little bit more panic in some people that probably shouldn't be there. The Internet is a double-edged sword, and that's great for some information, but it also misleads a lot of people. So some people are fearful about things they really shouldn't be fearful over, and that sometimes sets in a panic for those people. It starts working on their mind, and they're asking questions that are maybe a little too extreme, that probably don't need to be considered as much.
Okay. All right. We'll talk more about preparedness and what you're seeing at these preparedness conventions across the country when we come back. Craig Douglas is with us, and I've got a comment, and I'd love to hear your response to something that I saw that I couldn't believe at a convention. We'll be right back. Craig Douglas is with us, and Craig, I think you're aware that I don't like some of the tactics that are being used at preparedness conventions by people who are in the business of selling things at them. And fear is something that I would not allow to be used at the Get Prepared Expo, our expo, when we had them. And I saw something I just couldn't believe. So there was a guy, I was at a convention, and there was a guy who was giving a seminar, and he was talking about, how you need to have certain items, and there are going to be events that we're going to come, and it's going to be just terrible, and we're all going to die unless you have, these buckets of stuff that he happened to be selling that we're going to, make sure that you survive. And they were, I'm not going to use any names, will not use any names, but there was emergency buckets, okay, and you could buy them for $135, and they had a label on the front that said, what these buckets were. And so they were $135, but this particular seminar presenter had some that had no labels on them. And what he said was, well, I don't know what's in these. I have no idea. But what you can do is you can buy these for only $100 a bucket. And, if you're in your home and things go bad and the power grid goes down, or there's an EMP and people are wandering around and people come to your house and they go, hey, I need some food. You go, I'll tell you what, here's this bucket. I don't know what's in it, but you can take this bucket and leave. Leave me alone. Just take this bucket. I don't know what's in it. It's yours. And he was selling them as that's why you have this bucket with no label and no one knows what the contents are. That's selling fear to me. I can't believe it. I can't believe anybody would buy a bucket of something they don't know what it is for $100. I can't understand that. Okay? But I saw it happen. I saw people leaving with these buckets. They were delighted. They were taking them out to the car, and they were just happy as could be because they got what they thought might be $135 worth of something for $100, but they didn't know what it was, and there were no guarantees. It's like, I don't know what's in this bucket, but you give me $100 and it's yours. That's selling fear. Have you seen, maybe not that, but have you seen selling fear at these preparedness conventions?
All the time. In fact, although I'm not guilty of it, I probably sell some things, especially online, for people that are fearful, because I see spikes in my sales, especially online, where certain events happen, to where I think it has to be doing to whatever's in the news. And that's, of course, not preparing. That's reacting. But that's what I see mostly around the country. I always try to be very upfront with people exactly what they're getting, or maybe they don't need to get anything. In fact, when I do talks about food, I tell people, well, hey, if nothing happens beyond the ordinary that's happened all during our lifetimes or our grandparents' lifetimes, then you only need about 2 weeks of food with a food store, and you have that in your cabinets already. And you also have water in your water heater that you can drain off. That probably lasts you about 2 weeks. Most any disaster we've ever had, that's all we've ever had in the last 150 years. In this country, anyway. Now, it does happen all around the world, and we know things can happen. But I don't ever try to sell fear. So at that point, and I don't get people walking out of my lecture when I say that, because people do understand more things could happen. They aren't likely to happen, but they could, and they want to be prepared. But that's obviously not a fear tactic to tell them you might not need anything. If you believe that the world's going to continue on the way it has for the last 150 years, then you may not need anything, because there's never been any incident, even near you, Joplin, Missouri, there's never been any disaster that would require you to have more than 2 weeks worth of food storage in this country. Or even Katrina. Because if you're in Katrina, you could have walked a couple parishes away and they had, grocery stores open, fuel, hot and cold running water, everything. Nobody was really in jeopardy with all these disasters we've had, these natural disasters. What we're looking at is the potential for bad things to happen that aren't normal. Like if you lived in Syria, for instance, you might have needed 7 years worth of food storage. Or Venezuela, you might need 2 or 3 years worth of food storage. So it really depends on what you believe, and that's where the fear comes in. When people go online, they see things from some guru who is trying to sell them something. I call them the prophets for profit. And they get scared, and they think they have to run out and buy a bunch of food or gas masks or whatever. And I do see that, and I have no control over that. I try to talk to people in person to either find out what their fears are, to sell them what they really need instead of what they think they need because they heard some guru tell them that they were going to die. And in fact, just the other day, it was the end of the world. I don't know if you know. The 24th was the end of the world again. And that happens every month, too. We get end of the world days.
Well, I've seen people at seminars charging a lot of money, like $75 for 3 hours, and claiming they have inside information from secret sources. And 100% of the time, they have been wrong. I've seen it over and over and over, and I can't get over it. I'm stunned. It seems like people just tell me what to do. Just tell me what to do, because I don't know, and I'm afraid, and just tell me what to do, rather than learn for themselves. Craig Douglas, thank you so much for taking time out of your day.